Okay, good morning. Good morning. I am so happy to chair this first meeting of, let me read, Multimedia Newsroom and Data-Driven Journalism, the case of the New York Times and the Open Knowledge Foundation. As you know, we are having a meeting. We organized this meeting together with Centre de Cultura Contemporània de Barcelona and the Open Knowledge Foundation. Thanks for being here with us, and a special thanks to the keynote speakers that are in this. They are here with me. First, we are going to have the conference of Aron Pilhofer is here. Aron, welcome.
Thank you.
He's editor, interactive news at the New York Times. His team blends journalism and technology to enhance the Times reporting online through social media, community, and dynamic data-driven web applications. He is also the co-founder of two news-related non-profit organizations, DocumentCloud.org and Hacks and Hackers. Aron joined the Times in 2005 as a projector editor on the paper's newly expanded computer assistant reporting team. Prior to joining the Times, he was working at Center for Public Integrity of Washington and also the Investigative Reporters and Editions. Thanks a lot for being here again. And the second keynote speech will be Michael Bauer. Welcome too. Michael is living in Vienna and works as a data wrangler with the Open Knowledge Foundation, mostly around the School of Data. After a detour in biomedical research, where he learned to love data wrangling, he spent some time doing advocacy for his passion, freedom in digital age. Also, Michael, thanks for being here with us. And we start with the first keynote speaker, Aron Pilhofer.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to turn that on. Hello. Good morning. Hello, hello, hello. I'm really glad to be here. This has been my second trip to Spain. I'm sorry I don't speak any Spanish. I really apologize for that. So I'm going to do this in English, and I hope you'll forgive me. Actually, when I was invited to come over here, I was editor of interactive news at the New York Times. Since then, I got a fancy new title, which is Associate Managing Editor for Digital Strategy. A title, yeah. Thank you. A title that I chose myself because it sounds authoritative, but yet nobody knows what I do. Yes. So that's perfect in my world. But what I actually do, in addition to running the team that I'm going to talk mostly about today, beyond that is I work with the business side a lot. I am focused on fundamentally helping the New York Times transform from being a primarily print-focused organization to being a primarily digital-focused organization in all that means. And that means everything from our internal processes, how we produce our news report every day, to how we actually make money, believe it or not. And I'm happy to talk about that a little more in the Q&A if you are so inclined. But anyway, that's me, that's my Twitter handle, that's where I work, and here are the things that my team does. So interactive news, I founded it in 2007 after coming from the Center for Public Integrity in Washington, D.C. I arrived at the Times in 2005. and I was amazed. I came from a very small organization in Washington. We did a lot of very creative things, very ambitious things on the web. And I was amazed when I got to the Times, an organization where there was 1,000 people in the newsroom, 1,100 actually in the newsroom, and we couldn't do some of the projects that we had done at the Center for Public Integrity. And so through fits and starts, I agitated around the organization, and the team that I now run is the result of that. And basically it boils down to these four things: social media, technology, community, and analytics. And I'll talk about some of those things today. But the bottom line really is that we tell stories. It's just that our stories tend to be made of code as opposed to a traditional narrative. Anybody in this room know this guy? Anyone? If anybody knows this guy, I will give you €3, which is what I have in my pocket right now. No? No one? Okay. That's a pretty good bet. This is Adrian Halavati, and you can tell by the haircut that he's kind of a nerd like me. He is the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. He's a brilliant programmer, a visionary, and many years ago now started this site, created this site, which is Chicago Crime. It's no longer on the web. But this was one of the early, what we used to call mashups. Some of you may remember when we used to talk about mashups. And that's taking Google Maps and laying data over the top of them. And this, by the way, was built before there was an API, before there was any way to do this. The only ones who could make those maps was Google at the time. And what Adrian did was he was able to reverse engineer how Google made these maps. And then instead of putting the data that Google wanted to put on it, he was able to take, actually in this case, it's crime data from the city of Chicago and overlay it. So all those dots that you see up there were incidents of crime. And I saw this and I thought to myself, holy cow, this is amazing. Basically, this is journalism. Because, you know, I've been a crime reporter. I'm sure many of you have done this. Crime plus proximity equals news. If you live in a neighborhood and you know that there have been 4 murders within 4 blocks of your home, you're going to want to know that. That's important information. That's very relevant. That's highly relevant to you. And this is the first time that I saw the mix of how you could take an automated process, in this case geography plus data, combine the two together, and actually come to some form of journalism. He ended up working at the Washington Post, which was great for me. They started doing projects like this, which is their congressional votes database. But that was great for me when I started agitating at the New York Times for a team that had this capability. Because, as I said, the New York Times was pretty old school when I got there. We were basically doing single-pane Flash interactives. Anybody remember Flash? Yeah, I don't think so. And so this story that I'm going to talk about today is a few things. One is how we went from here to here. That's my team. That's where we sit in the second floor. But also some of the lessons that we've learned along the way. Some of the things that we've learned that kind of, I think, direct us and sort of like push us forward in this area of data journalism and why this is so important to our future. And it all kind of starts, for me anyway, here. I was able to make the case somewhat for a team like the one I run just based on the Washington Post, but this was the incident that completely catalyzed it for us. This is my hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And on August 1st of 2007, that bridge, which is one of the big thoroughfares over one of the bigger rivers in Minnesota, completely collapsed. This is a bridge that had been built in the 1960s. It's a design that was incredibly flawed. People knew it was flawed, and it had been recently inspected and found to be structurally deficient. How did I know all this? Because there's a database. Because the Federal Highway Administration produces a database that gives you all of that information about every bridge in every state that has significant amount of traffic going over it. So when this bridge collapsed, like many of our competitors, within an hour, we had the location of every bridge in the country that matched this sort of template. But guess what our competitors started doing? They started putting that data online. That's MSNBC. This is the Miami Herald. And here, People is what the New York Times had for a week. This is what we had, nothing. We had Zippo. This is what we finally published after a week. Okay, so you now think of, perhaps you think of the New York Times as a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of data-driven interactives. This is what we produced. This is the best we could do in August of 2007. So yeah, we've come a long way. This is pretty awful. It made me very sad. So when I got to the Times, the one desk that was really doing this kind of stuff was our graphics desk. And everything they did kind of felt and looked like a graphic. It was a single kind of pane, single thing. Since then, this is what's happened. We've started a huge, now growing, enormous video team. Our design team, our digital design team, we didn't have one then. Our digital design team has not only grown, but they've actually embedded in the newsroom with us. And they're, I would say, one of the 3 desks that does this sort of interactive projects like the ones I'm going to show you. Graphics has grown, and they've grown in their capabilities. They now do cartography. They do data visualization. They have statisticians. They have people on staff right now who do things like 3D motion graphics. These are not the kinds of skills that typically you find in newsrooms, but now, increasingly, these are the kinds of skills that newsrooms need. And then there's my team. When I got to the Times, there was basically one title for data journalists. And now, lots more. And so today when I talk about all this stuff, I think in order for you to kind of understand where we're headed, I think you like me, are going to have to sort of open your minds a little bit. You're going to have to open your minds to what journalism is, new forms of journalism. You're going to have to open your minds to the idea of data, what it is, and new forms of data, and how we should be using it. You're going to have to open your minds to who is a journalist, because that is changing, and it's changing quickly. Okay, so what have we learned? Lesson 1. Content management systems universally suck, and they should be destroyed. You need the ability to build outside of the 4 square walls that your content management systems provide. Does everybody know what I mean by a content management system? WordPress, or some awful thing that your IT department bought for you so that you can publish the day's paper online on your newspaper.com. You know, the thing that probably doesn't even allow you to put hyperlinks into stories, the thing that is painful, the thing that produces this sort of highly templated, sort of very boring kind of environment. Well, let me just show you what we used to do. This is a story that, or actually part of a series by Walt Bogdanich and Jake Hooker. This is from 2007. This series was about China, was trade with China, and it was incredibly impactful. It changed a large amount of the country's opinion about trade with China, which to that point was very favorably viewed. But what they revealed was that there were toys being imported that were poisoned, that there was things like toothpaste that were being poisoned. And this changed a lot of the way people felt about China. This was an enormous amount of undertaking. This was an enormous piece of reporting. Does this look special in any way, shape, or form to you? Who thinks this looks really special? That this reflects? Yeah, okay. Nobody raised their hand, I'm glad. Yeah, so this is our standard article template. We just kind of toss it in there. We have a lovely piece of art. This could be a wire story. This could be a 3-year investigation. In the right-hand side there, that C column, what we call the C column, that thing has a bunch of unrelated garbage in it. Of course, we love the big ad, but it's got a bunch of unrelated stuff. Here we go again, more of it. We have a list of stories you can click on. And on the left, the thing that really makes me crazy is the stack of multimedia, because you know, there's the story and then there's everything else. And all of that everything else, all the multimedia, all of that is secondary to the story, right? They shouldn't be together, right? Or should they? And then the thing that the really soul-draining moment that you get to as any reader, you get to the bottom of a story like this and you see, oh my God, there's 8 links of pagination. There's no way I'm going to read 8 links of pagination. And stuff like that just makes me very, very mad. So who has not seen this? Who in here has not seen this? Thank you, sir. You are a brave man for saying that. Thank you. Who is lying to me right now? Oh, really? You guys have all seen this before? Really? Okay. I'm not going to talk about this much. My team, for what it's worth, had nothing to do with this at all. But it is an interesting project for a few reasons. This is Snowfall. It won the Pulitzer Prize last year for feature writing. Part of the reason it won is because of the way it looks. Does this look like a special piece of journalism to you? Yes, it does. What's amazing about Snowfall, and I apologize about the video here because it's kind of quirky, but I don't want to rely on the internet. Notice one thing, it scrolls. This is 19,000 words, and it scrolls. There's no pagination here at all. Video, it's no longer a secondary element to the story. It's right there in context. Right when you're reading about that woman, she's right there. The infographics, again, not a secondary component. They're organically inside in the reading experience. In fact, in some ways, they interrupt the reading experience, which in this case works quite well. Just to kind of hammer this point home, for the fun of it, I decided to throw Snowfall back into our ugly old template. If Snowfall had been written in 2007, this is probably what it would have looked like. Again, stuck into a very not-so-special template. It would have a piece of art and then a bunch of garbage in the C column that had nothing to do with the story. You would end up with a stack of multimedia, again, all secondary content, not in any way organically attached to the story, and then you'd get to the bottom, and I mentioned this is a 19,000 piece of reporting. You'd probably go through all 41 links to read this story, right? So the high end, the moral of the story here is you need to get outside your CMS, and here's an example of how we did that. This is a project we launched called Schoolbook, and the result, and the reason we did this is because the New York Times is a very big place. Think of it as a big department store. We have sports, we have politics, we have news, we have foreign news, we have opinion. There's a lot there. And there's only one homepage. And we're an enormously homepage-driven organization. 75% of our traffic starts at the homepage. We have the biggest school district in the country in New York City, and we do actually cover it pretty well. The problem is that kind of coverage rarely makes it to the homepage. So what do? Well, if we did nothing, we would perpetrate the perception of the New York Times that we don't cover New York. And that's something that a lot of people believe, because a lot of that news just doesn't make it to the homepage. And so in conversation with the education editor, we talked about this problem a little bit. And we talked about, in particular, the problem of school data. Every year they come to us and they say, well, report cards are coming out. This is an annual sort of data or sort of a data dump from the Department of Education that gives the results of this year's standardized tests. And every year we would dutifully produce an interactive, and every year we'd put it up and the same thing would happen. It would sit, and then one day a year we would update it and traffic would spike, and then the day after it would drop, and then it would sit for the rest of the year. And the education editor wanted to expand that. She wanted to be more ambitious, and I said, no, we're not doing that. I said, we will do it under one condition. We'll do it under one condition. That is that we can imagine, we could do an expanded data project, but only in the context of expanding how we cover local education. And so we sat in a conference room, the reporters, the editors, my developers, designers, graphics people, and we started with a blank slate, and we imagined how we could cover local education differently, and this is the result. And what we decided is it was going to be about news, it was going to be about conversation, and it was going to be about data, but it was going to be about data in context and data that parents could actually use. We did something incredibly novel, I think, in the world of journalism. We thought about who our target audience is. Wow, imagine that. Think about who we're actually writing this stuff for ahead of time. And so that was the entire design framework of this site. And so you could do things here like compare schools. We created these indexes so that you could make apples-to-apples comparisons, not only between schools, but at one point we were talking about expanding this to other districts. You could even make comparisons between districts. And here's an example of how to compare schools. So the moral of the story is that you need to get beyond the sort of 4 square walls of your content management system. You need to be thinking about how the content, what template needs to fit the content and not the other way around. Okay, lesson 2. Storytelling takes many different forms. Here's a project from the BBC that I absolutely love. Last year, they got together a group of sociologists and other academics, and they did a big piece looking at the traditional class system in the UK and how it had changed, and how that if you were going to now create sort of an idea of what the class system looks like, what would be the different folks who would sort of fall into each of these categories. And so they did 3 things. They created a broadcast story based on it. They created a sort of a traditional inverted pyramid style written news story about it. And then they created, their specials team created this amazing interactive. And what this interactive did was it allowed you to take a short survey and basically find yourself in the data. What class, where do you fall in the system? In this, where do you fall in this class system? And guess which one did the best? Guess which one told the story the best? This one, by far. This thing blew up. It was, many of you may have even seen it. Another example. This is a piece that I'm actually going to show you because I think it is magical and wonderful in every way. There it is. Let me move this onto there. Okay, so this is a piece, this is a little old now, but this is a piece that one of our really talented graphic artists, our graphic editors did for the Vancouver Olympics. And what she wanted to do was tell the story of these timed events, was particularly looking at how close these events actually are. You see it on TV, you see there's a couple of skiers, you see one's ahead of the other one, you see the time that they're ahead or behind, but you don't really get a sense of how close this event really is. And she tried a bunch of different ways to explore that, and eventually came up with this device, which I think tells this story beautifully. And I'm going to do it right now, I think. Okay, so what you heard right there is the difference between a gold medal in the men's downhill and 21st place in the men's downhill. If you lined up all 21 skiers at the top of the hill and said go, that's how they would finish. That's how close that event really is. You could try to create that. You could try to write a news story. You could try to create a video. You could try to do a broadcast of some way that would explain that, but I guarantee you, you would not be able to tell the story better than that. Okay? We've played around with different story forms. The Lively Morgue is an example. We've created sort of a meta story here on top of our archive. We have 4.5 million historical New York Times photos in the building next door. It's a real Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of an archive. It's crazy. You go down there. It's in the basement. There's like rows and rows and rows of boxes and filing cabinets just filled with this stuff. And we wanted to use some of it, so we created this. And it's kind of a meta story. If you go online and follow it, there's a little Easter egg for you. You can see the photo and see the back, which is kind of cool. But every photo leads to the next. There's a sort of a long narrative arc that this project has been doing for a year, and it's incredibly popular. This was our first experiment with Tumblr, trying to do something interesting on Tumblr. This is a great combination of something that works really well, again, on Tumblr, and also technology. So one of my developers, Jake Harris, was playing around with natural language processing libraries and figured out a way to detect the occurrence of accidental haiku in a text. And so he wrote a script that every day would just trawl through the New York Times and find incidences of haiku, and started pulling those out. And so every day we'll publish 5 or 6 really good little pieces of accidental haiku to the site, to this Tumblr. And it's, again, really, really popular. Here's an example of a magazine piece that was about stupid addictive games, and what better way to actually demonstrate stupid addictive games but to create a stupid addictive game online where you can blow up the web page that's around it. This was done by our multimedia team, and it was I think it's one of my favorite pieces. My favorite was in the comments. One commenter didn't like this piece very much, apparently. They were a little grumpy about it, and said so. Another commenter replied basically by saying, I just took my spaceship down here and blew up your comment, which I love. All right, lesson 3, don't do it alone. One of the big changes in my team was 2.5 years ago when the editor asked me to take on social media and create a social media team. And it seemed like a weird combination, social media and technology, but it actually has been amazing for us. And here's an example. If anyone has ever covered a political campaign, you know that the day where there is absolutely nothing to talk about of any substance is Election Day. It's the worst day of any political campaign. All you have is in the morning, the politicians show up, they wave, they vote, they wave at the cameras and leave. Otherwise, there is nothing to talk about. But you have time to kill. You have to produce something that day. So our contribution to Election Day was this. We knew that people were going to be telling sort of the story of their experience in photos on Instagram. And so we created this. This was highly curated. We had people all day long kind of trawling through and pulling photos. People actually hashtagged us, so it wasn't like just random. These were people who actually were sending us images. And just through the day, we were adding these images, and it told a sort of beautiful kind of story through the eyes of individual voters. It ended up being a really nice piece of journalism. We're doing a lot more proactively with this kind of a strategy. Here was a call out we did in Korean and English right when tensions were flaring on the Korean peninsula. And this resulted in about 600 people responding and telling us, hey, absolutely, if you need an on-the-ground source to talk to, here's my contact information. It was about 600 people in 24 hours. Here's another example. This is the word train. These words would flow by during the day, and we asked, what you're not seeing there is the input part up the top, but we asked readers one simple question. Okay, 2 simple questions. What's the one word that describes your state of mind right now? And are you an Obama or McCain supporter or neither? And people would input a word or add to a word, and they would scale up and down during the day and just keep flowing by. We would timestamp this every hour so you could go back and see how things changed during the day. And it was, we knew it was going to happen. As the day started, things were pretty parallel, and then at night, obviously, they diverged pretty dramatically. This thing was absolutely mesmerizing. Nobody understood it. It was a really complicated interactive that nobody understood, but people could not stop watching it. They kept loading it and loading it and loading it and loading it, and this thing almost took down our servers on Election Day 2008. We learned a lesson there about caching. Caching is your friend. Another example is we used to do a lot of these. We've done fewer of these. Is these sort of photo walls. Sometimes these can be very popular, very powerful, if they're highly edited and highly curated. Here's where I think we're all headed. This is, I think, the most exciting project that we've worked on this year. This is a series from Libby Rosenthal about medical expenses, which in the US are crazy expensive in some cases. In some cases, orders of magnitude more expensive than they are in Europe or Canada. And she wanted to know a simple question, why? And we knew, based on the kinds of procedures she was looking at, that this is going to impact a lot of people. There are going to be a lot of people with stories to tell, and a lot of people who wanted to find themselves in the data. So here's an example of a call out we're doing inline, where we're asking your response and then showing you where you fit based on others' responses. Here again, in very sort of snowfall-like fashion, we are putting infographics directly into the story. We are interrupting your reading to put the infographic contextually into the story so that it's not a secondary piece of content anymore, but it's right there. We're doing the same with reader reaction. We're actually asking you to comment on the relevant piece, on something that's highly relevant to write what she's talking about in that story. We're not putting comments at the bottom necessarily. I mean, we're doing that too, but in this case, we're getting your response in line. And here's the shocking thing. if you ask readers to respond in a highly contextual way to something that really is impactful to them, and you do it in a very focused way, you ask a very specific question, guess what you get? You get amazing responses. So, and then here's how we did the comments at the bottom, just so you can see we did it a little more structured, so you can kind of filter, these comments a little bit. Here's another piece of this that was relatively new for us. If you filled out one of those longer open-ended questions, you were prompted at the end to give us more information if you had a story to tell, or if you wanted to be part of the series. And the interesting thing here is we asked for your email address. So what happened here? We ended up getting, just by way of comparison, the highest number of comments that we've received on any item as far as I can remember, and that's going back almost the entire time we've had comments, was about 3,400, give or take, for Nate Silver's blog on Election Day. This piece generated 17,000 in a relatively short period of time. 8,900 people filled out this and sent us their email address and said, yeah, I would like to be part of your series. What readers do not know, although I do, so I will now tell you, is that every non-expert source in this, every voice that you hear, every character in this series who isn't an expert was sourced through a mechanism like this. So this is enormously powerful, and it's kind of in one sense sort of a duh, kind of a no duh sort of thing. It's like, wow, if you ask readers to participate, they will, and they want to. But like, this is not something that newsrooms generally do. And the power of the web, the power of digital technologies like this, allow us to do this at a scale that we could not have possibly done in any sort of analog form. And that made me happy. Okay, lesson 4. Data, big data. I have to drop big data here somewhere. Ooh. Okay, this actually has nothing to do with big data, but I just have to drop the buzzword. So this you're looking at, what this is more aligned to actually is sort of the tools of data science, which is another buzzword that I just dropped, so thank you very much. I'm 2 for 2. This is an internal website. This is not meant to go to for the public. But what we're doing here is something that, as a political reporter, I would have killed for 8 years ago when I was doing this professionally. We have a very smart member of the team who's really good with sort of machine learning and with statistical modeling. And what he has done here is created a program that will trawl through millions and millions of campaign donations and try to figure out whether one person who donated to one campaign is the same as another person who donated to another campaign. And you can see here how hard that really is. This is a donor named Stephen Krause. You can see the contributor name. All 3 candidates are different. You can see the contributor name in some cases includes a middle initial, in some cases it doesn't. You can see there's a different zip code. You can see that the employer is different in every case. This is a really tough problem to solve. But what Chase has done here is figured out a way with a pretty high statistical probability to link these things together and say, yeah, we're pretty sure that these are the same person. Now, would you publish this directly in the newspaper without checking? Of course not. But for a political reporter, someone who's trying to find out just, hey, what's the starting point to know whether this person is a significant donor, this is a godsend. Because the only other way to do this is by hand. Earlier I mentioned analytics, and analytics is a topic that if you ask me a question, I will talk about it for 2 hours. So ask me about analytics at your peril. But this is a site that we created around the Oscars. It's historical dresses. So a lot of the stuff we do is kind of light and featurey. This is an example of that. This too is an example of a very common pattern for a lot of the interactives that we build. At the top, you'll see this is our take. This is sort of the editor's view of things. This is the story that we find in the data. And then at the bottom, these are the tools that we give you, the reader, to create your own stories, right? So our take and then tools that you can use to kind of like to create your own story. Very, very, very common pattern for us. The thing we didn't know is, do people actually use it this way? And we wanted to know the answer to that question because we spend an awful lot of time building these things, and we were pretty much publishing them based on gut instinct. And so we wired this thing up using a piece of software that we have to measure clicks, and by God, thank God, they do. You can see the darker shade of red there means more usage. The lighter shade is less usage. Here are the little tidbits that you find when you start actually paying attention to what readers do and how they consume content. Another question we wanted to know is, do readers who use these sorts of filters, these devices, these, this is a pretty complicated interactive. You can scroll by year, you can filter by color, you can filter by type, you can click on slides, you can do a lot right here. And we wanted to know, do readers who use those devices actually have a deeper level of engagement with a piece like this than readers who don't? And as it turns out, they do. The blue line, the light blue line, are readers who, going up on the left are the number of actions. These are all individual users, but going up on the left is the number of actions that user took. And then to the right is time on page, time that they spent on this interactive. And you can see the little blue line there represents the fact that, yes, by and large, readers who used those devices stayed on this thing longer than readers who didn't. The purple are readers who just clicked on slides, just clicked on images. But circled up here is the thing that nobody expected to find. So all that big purple cluster of dots, those are individuals who took 500 plus actions on the site and only clicked on images. So you can see what that is, right? Somebody comes to the page, they click on a dress, and they click next, 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 500 plus times. 5% of the people who came to this interactive did that and only that. Wow. So what do we learn from something like that? Well, actually, we don't know. We don't know. But it's really interesting, right? We can know. We have the technology now to know who those 5% really are. We can find out what their reading behavior is on the site. We know whether they came back. We can find out a lot about those readers. That is potentially an addressable audience. It could be that this is an extension of what we already know. You know, if you put slideshows online that people click, 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 click. It's rare that you see a slideshow that's 500 and some dresses long, right? And these are people, 5%, who clicked all 500. We could have a group of readers out there who are just completionists. These are people who, if you give them a task, they will finish it, come hell or high water, however long that task is. I don't know, but it sure is interesting to start kind of diving into these questions. All right, lesson 5. You do not need an army to do this kind of work. This is the Bay Citizen. Now it's part of the Center for Investigative Reporting in California. This is a piece they built based on bicycle accidents in California, in the Bay Area. And it was built entirely by about, I think it was 2 people, and entirely with free tools, in this case, Google Fusion tables, and a little bit of design and front-end work. This is a piece that WNYC, which is the local radio station, public radio station in New York, it is not the prettiest map in the world. This was one guy. This is John Keefe, who I happen to think is probably the smartest person doing this kind of work in the business today. He decided, nobody understands how we elect a president in the US. I barely understand it myself. But Iowa caucus was the first contest in the nomination of the next Republican nominee, which ended up being Mitt Romney. But in this particular case, Google had approached the Republican Party of Iowa and made a special deal to have access to their data, and they were going to make that data available on their website. And John, smartly, knew this and thought, hey, I bet I could use that data too, and kind of reverse engineered the Google website. And so he used the Google data. Everybody else used a different data source. The data source we had always used for this? Guess who was winning all night? He was. John Keefe, one guy, first map that he had ever produced, was ahead of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, National Public Radio, was ahead of everybody by 15 minutes. This was the most up-to-date map on Iowa caucus night. This is a piece from Wired Italy about schools, and it's a great piece. I don't think it actually got enough attention, to be quite honest. What they did was, in a country where there is no freedom of information law, no access to data, they managed to get school data, and we were able to plot the location of schools that are near fault lines, near seismic activity. And then they were able to determine whether that school, if there were some sort of a seismic event, was in high, medium, or low danger for collapse. And guess what? There's a lot of schools that are sitting on or near fault lines in Italy that are in serious danger of collapsing should any sort of seismic event occur. A story that writes itself. And again, this was, I think, 2 people. Okay, enough of the sermon. Where to begin? First of all, there are no excuses anymore. No excuses allowed. There used to be a time when this sort of work was very complicated, when it involved lots and lots of people, when you had to have very specialized skills. When we started my team back in 2007, the only way we could get things online that were dynamic, where a database was behind them, was to run servers. Now, there are all kinds of ways you can do that without ever having to run a server. You can do a lot even without knowing a ton of code. Also, the tools have improved dramatically, as I think most of you are aware. Right now, there's really no excuse for doing this, for not doing this kind of work. And if that's not incentive enough, then let me provide perhaps a little more. Within the next year, the New York Times, almost certainly, will hit sort of an inflection point. We'll have more digital subscribers than we do print subscribers for the first time. That has some enormous implications, doesn't it, to the way we do business. All of a sudden, more of our paying customers, essentially, will be seeing us in purely digital format than in print. And if that doesn't incent you, sorry, it's a terrible word, to learn some of this stuff, to kind of understand digital technology and understand storytelling in a digital environment, I don't know what will. This is our future, and we all have to kind of understand that. Best advice I can give is just do it. Don't wait. Don't make it perfect. John Keefe, when he made that election map on Iowa caucus night, had no idea what he was doing. No idea when he started out what he was doing. And he just worked and worked and hacked and asked a lot of questions and found people to help him out and eventually got it done. Just do it. It doesn't have to be beautiful. You just have to start. The best advice that I have ever gotten and or given, ask for forgiveness, not permission. If you ask your IT department if it's okay for you to put this interactive thing online, I can almost certainly tell you what their answer will be. If you ask permission to do things, I can guarantee you will get a no. You'll always find somebody who can say no to you, right? So don't look, just do it. Great advice from my friend Matt Waite. When you are trying to convince an editor or someone above you that this is something that we should be doing, demos, not memos. However ugly it is, however non-functional it is, however terrible it looks, create something. Show your editor what it's going to do. Show them something, even if it's a tiny bit of the functionality of what you ultimately want to produce. Just show them something. Matt Waite this is my friend Matt, he created a site called PolitiFact, which won a Pulitzer Prize in 2009. He was not a developer. He was not a developer when he started working on that project. And he just taught himself how to do it. But he was able to get the time to do it because he showed editors how this might work and didn't demo it. There are going to be things that you're going to want to do that do require skills that are probably more than what you have or can learn quickly. You may need to do something quickly for a story. You may want to do something around an event. Probably there are people in your newsroom now, in fact, almost certainly in your news organization, who can help you. So let me give you a pro tip how to find them. I have no idea who this person is. That doesn't matter. I don't care. I want you to look right there. Okay? If you're up in the lunchroom, or you're hanging around, you're walking through the IT department, and you see somebody who's got a computer, not named Michael Bauer because he's a contrarian. If you see somebody with a computer that has all kinds of stickers on it, chances are that person would be fairly open to a conversation about participating in your project. Now, that person may or may not say yes, but probably they are involved in the open source community in some way. They may be involved in the open data community in some way. They may have similar ideas and ideals about information and how technology should, in fact, you're going to hear a lot about that in a little bit. This is the place to start. But understand that when you bring someone into your project, you are bringing in a collaborator. The worst mistake a journalist can make, and they make it all the time, is just going to a technologist and saying, do my work for me. That's not the way it works. It's not the way it works. My desk, which is filled with people who come from a non-traditional background, they don't come from journalism backgrounds, but they are journalists. My desk is a news desk. We say no to projects. We bring projects to other desks. We are full partners in the reporting process, and that's the way you need to approach it. And so thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for your magnificent demos, for your 5 lessons. And I think it's now time for questions, to have this dialogue with Aron. Who start?
Hello, Mr. Pilhofer. Thank you for the speech. It was great. My question is about video, and the thing that it's maybe one of the newest things that's going to happen to press. I think you talk a bit about that. I'm really curious about what you think press should do with what's happening. That, for example, in tablets and smartphones, of course, TV apps are having a less, I don't know the word, success. And press are having much more success. That's obvious now. And so I think press maybe is going to leave a new golden area. And maybe one of the things that should happen, or that's going to happen, is that video is going to come inside press. Yeah. So what do you think about press should do with that? Do you think press should just replicate what TV were doing? Or no? Or maybe it's the time for...
No.
Great. Or maybe it's a time for new things, and what things? For example, I think should be... maybe it's interesting what YouTube has done with a new window, so you can keep navigating while you... Because it's video, and while you read, you have talking about that, so it's interesting how we can do that. And yeah, that's my question.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am definitely not the person to talk to in any depth about video, but I will not prevent that from offering at least somewhat of an answer, because it's something that we're dealing with right now, obviously. There's a huge investment in video because it is, among other things, one of the areas that advertisers it's one of the growth areas of revenue for us, and everyone else. So everyone is moving in this direction. I happen to think this is incredibly fortuitous, because I agree completely with you that in some ways video video is a huge piece of what I think sort of the next iteration of the kinds of digital journalism we're doing is. I think the problem traditionally with video is the same problem we had with Flash, in that it isn't really part of the digital environment. It's kind of sitting on top of the digital environment. And it tends to feel like it's separate from, no matter how integrated you make it, it tends to feel separate from the experience of storytelling. I don't know if you saw the Guardian piece on the NSA documents, or oh God, what's the name of that story that you saw? Okay, they did something really interesting. Yeah, did you like that? I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought I would hate it, but I loved it. And so what they did was, instead of quoting, printed quoting experts, as the story, as you read through the story, you actually heard their quotes. It sounds kind of cheesy when I explain it, but go check it out. It actually really, really works. And that, I think, is a great example of how video can organically work with other forms of multimedia and other kinds of digital content. I think that's like a great template, and it opens the door to a whole lot more. So yeah, I totally agree with you that video needs to be. Should it be in a newsroom? Oh, absolutely. It needs to be, to my mind, if there's one part of the New York Times that I think we need to fix, it's that the video unit itself, while it's in the newsroom, is a little too distant from the rest of the multimedia, graphics, and interactive kind of departments. We're on the second floor, they're up on the fourth floor. That doesn't seem like a huge distance, but in newsroom geography, it's enormous. I want to bring those two things a little closer together because there's so much potential. So I totally agree with you.
I have two questions.
Hi. You said, I understand you are leading the multimedia team in the New York Times. How many people do you have in the team, and what kind of professional profiles do you have? How many programmers, how many designers?
So
Thank you.
There's 3 desks. In addition to video, which we just talked about, there's 3 desks that are involved in multimedia, presentation, story templates, things like Snowfall, things like our election night, things like school books, stuff like that. And that's design, which is about 10 people right now, embedded in the newsroom. There's interactive news, which is my team. The entire desk of mine is about 40 people. Of that, like 20 are developers, primarily technologists. We're the ones who primarily build things that are not in our CMS. We're the ones who can create these kinds of experiences outside the CMS, if need be. But we do a lot within the CMS too. And then there's the graphics team, which in total is about 40 people, maybe on that order. And I'd say about 1/3 of them work primarily in digital, either exclusively or primarily in digital. So that's the total. Now, that sounds like a lot of people, and it is. And what that allows us to do are the
110.
Yeah, I'd say it's about right. Yeah, that's good math. Yeah. Some good data journalism right there. So what that does, what that allows us to do are these big, ambitious, sweeping projects. If you look at Snowfall, there's like 16 people on that, right? But in general, the projects we work on are usually very small teams. So what that number of people allows us to do are many, many, many projects in parallel. That's what that gives us the ability to do. You don't need 110, thank you, people to do this kind of work. Really, you need like 3. To start, you need like 3. And I can tell you, there are news organizations out there that are doing work that is, I would argue, in some cases, far more creative than the work that we're doing. With teams of 3 and 4 people. You just have to sort of know that you're not going to ever match in terms of output, but you can individually match in terms of the quality and creativeness of the work. What are the profiles of these people? My people tend to come from non-traditional sort of backgrounds for newsrooms. Most of them, the first newsroom they ever set foot in was the New York Times. They come from technology, they come from startups, they come from wherever. Some of them had some journalism background. In a couple cases, an extensive amount of journalism background, but for the most part, it's that. Graphics team, mostly graphics. In some cases, same there too. I mentioned earlier, we have someone on the team who does 3D motion graphics, and obviously not a traditional newsroom background. The design team typically comes from digital design backgrounds, in a lot of cases agencies and things like that, sometimes from other content organizations. So that's kind of the totality of it.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, thank you very much for your extensive talk. And I would like to make two questions. The first one, 4 years ago, there was a book published that was called The Last Issue of the New York Times. And it said that there was a fair about media, and Rupert Murdoch was there, Walter Oppenheimer was there, and Walter Oppenheimer came to the stage and said, I think that, guess what, in 4 years, there will be no newspapers. And I don't care about that. And I would like to ask you, because we've seen that data journalism is basically driven through multimedia. And as you said before, there will be more subscribers in the digital issue rather than in the paper issue. What will be the future of the paper,
right,
proper paper? The second question is about privacy. We've seen that in some projects, you ask personal data from the people. Right. And the question is, what do you do with this data?
Right. No, the second one's a really good question. So don't let me get out of here without answering that. Don't let me off the hook there. That's a great question. What do I think the future of the printed newspaper is? It's going to be around for us anyway for a while, long while. It is still, even though we will have more digital subscribers if things go well, at the end of 2014, sometime in 2015, probably. The vast majority of our revenue, I don't know exactly percentage-wise what it is, it might be 60, 80%, something like that, comes from print. That's just the bottom line, that's just the fact. So for now, for the near future, maybe the far future, I don't think the printed newspaper is going to go away. The more important question, I think, at least right now, maybe not the more important question, but the more immediate question is a matter of when you reach that inflection point when your primary platform is digital and not print. Because there will come that point. We may be there now, and we just don't know it, where we have to, our primary focus is the digital report and all that implies, and the printed newspaper is simply the downstream product of that. So every day we sort of snapshot what we did, we've taken a snapshot of our digital efforts, and that goes into the printed paper every day. Right now, that's exactly opposite. We primarily write for the paper, we primarily produce for the paper in terms of the amount of resources going to each platform, and the website still tends to be the downstream product, the apps, the downstream product of the day's paper. And you can see it reflected in the design, right? I mean, our apps look like an edition of the New York Times. They update, that's great, but they still look and feel like a very traditional newspaper. And when you reach that inflection point, when you realize, oh my God, our focus needs to be digital first, digital only maybe, that all changes. Like an app like we have right now is unacceptable, completely unacceptable. Quaint traditions like the morning news meeting. Think about that, the morning news meeting. We all get together for a morning news meeting. It's kind of nuts when you think about it in a digital environment, right? So I think a lot of that's going to change. Second question, see, good, nice. Privacy, yeah. We do a lot with readers. We do ask our readers. We have a pretty solid regimen for keeping that data safe and secure. And we have a chief security officer who is in my hair on a fairly regular basis to make sure that we are keeping that data safe and secure. We are only taking data from readers that they provide to us. And if you look at our callouts, the things that we do ask for, they very clearly are not, we're really clear about how we're going to use that information. I don't know that we're always as clear as we should be, but we are very, very careful about that because there is a huge danger. People can reveal private information about themselves that could end up being harmful. But I don't know that this is any different than it's ever been. The same is true when you speak to a journalist. People will tell you things, a source will tell you things. This has happened to me countless times, where you talk to a source and they say something to you on the record that you say, "Oh God," you almost say to yourself, "Boy, I wish you hadn't told me that," right? So this has been a problem for journalists forever. It's no different in the digital world. We just have to be very conscious of and attendant to the protections, making sure that we don't abuse the trust that people put in us, and that most importantly, and this is the thing that I've actually asked my team to kind of slow down on this because of it, we need to honor reader contributions, not necessarily because of privacy, but because we've done things like we've asked people in the case of all the controversy over the Olympics, the Sochi Olympics, and the comments about gay rights. We've asked people to talk about that, and that's very sensitive personal information that people are giving to us, and we need to honor those contributions. When people are willing to open up to us, we need to honor that. And we need to be very careful, respectful, and we need to use it in ways that actually tell the story we need to tell without undermining our credibility or their privacy. So it's a huge, huge, huge issue, particularly in the digital world, because this stuff is so easy to get wrong.
Okay. Do you have more questions, please?
No, it's just a follow-up. This data that you take, afterwards you own it on your team. I mean, it does not belong to the company. So
correct.
The company.
Well, it belongs to the company in the sense that we all belong to the company. But if you mean, does it go to our marketing department or our advertising? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Yeah. No way. No.
No.
Some more questions? Some more questions, please?
I've used all of you up. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. This is unprecedented. Michael. Excuse me.
Michael.
No real question, but in addition to the discussion about video, I don't know if any one of you has seen Soundsight by the Knight Media Lab.
Yeah.
They worked on a way to get audio documents, like recordings of a concert or a recorded interview, into your text. And the way this works is that you can sort of mark sentences in your article and then have a little play button by it, and then you can hear exactly what they're talking about. And this is a genius way of integrating audio and audio comments or audio interviews within text.
And while we're calling out cool technology that helps make video more organic to the web, Popcorn JS is a project of the Mozilla Foundation. It's fantastic. It is the first piece of software that I've seen that makes video accessible to sort of programmatic, I'm going to say manipulation, but that's the only word I can come up with. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. It makes it available to work with programmatically, and the potential there is enormous. It's a very cool piece of software.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for being here, for your interesting experience. I think New York Times is at the top of the experience on digital media and its relation with social media too. We stop now for 10 minutes, not more than 10 minutes, and we move to Michael. Okay? 10 minutes.
Thank you. That's very interesting.